preacher from the church out in the middle of nowhere. And recently I was inspired to write a bundle of short stories about some of my more interesting church members. Of course, I changed their real names and I altered the actual circumstances, not so they would protect their innocence, because most of them weren't innocent at all. But I did that so it'd make the stories more interesting for you. And that's why I have to call them the tall tales. These are the tall tales from the church out in the middle of nowhere. And the first tall tale is chapter 1, Miss Heidi Holbrook. Now, some folks asked me once, "Hey, P-Bob," I know that's a little strange, but that's what they called me, P-Bob. Not like most folks who called their preacher Reverend Mike or Father Tim or Pastor Bob. But my folk, it was always P-Bob this or P-Bob that. And I still remember that wily little fella that gave me that nickname. I don't believe it came out of the affections of his heart, but it did hang on to me over the years in an affectionate sort of way. "Hey, P-Bob," they asked, "what's it like being the preacher of a church of 200? Well, I was never one to pull any punches, and so I just fired right back at him straight up. Being the preacher of 200 people is like having 198 babies sucking on your titties 24/7. Now, I said it that way to kind of rattle their cages, maybe quiet them down. But it didn't faze them one bit. They just came on back with another question. "Well, what about them other two? What's it like with them?" "Well," I said, "have you ever raised any teenagers?" That's what them other two were like. And it was like that. I wasn't joshing them. Most of the time my people were like a bunch of whining and wanting babies looking to be nurse-fed, while them other two you never heard from till you got that call in the middle of the night because they were in trouble and needed your help. But I loved them all the same, each and every one of them. They were all my babies. But there was one of them babies in particular that gave me more trouble than all of the others put together. And she was so ornery, she almost had this man of the cloth hating another human being. While at the same time, I was growing to love her more than any of the other sheep in the flock. You know how that happens, right? I guess the best way to explain it is by what the mother of 6 told the doctor when he asked her, "Which one of your children do you love the most?" She said, "Oh, come on, Doc. You know I love all of them the same." And he said, "Actually, that's outright impossible. No one can love 6 different people all the very same. So which one of them do you love the most?" Well, she thought about it a few seconds, and she said, "I guess that'd have to be the one that was hurting the most. That would be the one I would be loving on the most." Well, that was Miss Heidi Holbrook. She was the one who was hurting the very most. She really was one sorrowful soul. She had more issues than the magazine section down at the county library. And that's who this here story is all about, Miss Heidi Holbrook. Now, she came into the fold a little bit later than most, and by that I mean that she wasn't born into it. But she was adopted by one of the families in our church, and she never did take too kindly to being dropped off out there in the middle of nowhere, as she said it. She had a heart on for life, I tell you. None of it sat very well with her at all. Have you heard that saying that hurting people, they hurt people? Well, Miss Heidi Holbrook, she was hurting way more than any of the rest of us. And consequently, she hurt more of us than you could shake a stick at. And her favorite target, or so it seemed, was this old preacher. And by old, I don't mean that I could be Heidi's grandpa, because actually we were very close to the same age. You see, the Holbrooks adopted her in the same year that I left the seminary and went to preaching out there at the church in the middle of nowhere. At the time, I was I had just turned 22 years of age, and Heidi was 15. Wow. That was 40 years ago. I'm 62, still preaching out there at the church in the middle of nowhere. Only difference now is, drum roll please, Miss Heidi Holbrook is now my bride. Yeah, I started courting Heidi about 20 years ago after Helen passed from cancer. I can't rightly remember when it was that I started having feelings for her. I think it might have been on that night she was helping me prepare the elements for the sacrament of Holy Communion. Things got a little sideways that night. And by sideways, I mean we ended up, well, you never mind how we ended up. It ain't none of your business. But we very quickly fell in love, and soon after we were hitched. And while a lot of people would say that we are, well, what we really are, a happily married couple, you can bet your bippy Miss Heidi Holbrook is still the honoriest member this preacher has ever seen. She's still the biggest baby of them all. But she does come by honestly. You see, when Heidi was growing up, she didn't have it as good as some of the rest of us did. Her mama not only abandoned her, but left her for dead along the side of the road. A city garbage worker actually found her, and they placed her in the foster care system. And none of them foster homes that she went to were anything that you or I would even want to spend an hour in. It's a miracle, really, that Heidi has any capacity for love at all. But she does. Somehow, through it all, she has developed a heart of gold. After high school, she took a minimum wage job, moved into a makeshift studio apartment out behind the barn of the Snavels. She doesn't make very much money, and she never seems to be concerned about building any kind of cushion into her financial security. Oh, she has plenty to live on, but with what she has left over, she seems to be awful generous, and sometimes to the point of foolishness. One day I was driving through town, and I saw Miss Heidi crawling out of the dumpster behind the Piggly Wiggly Market. So I turned my car into the alley and rolled down the window and said, "Hey, Miss Heidi, what are y'all up to?" Well, without any kind of embarrassment at all, she just looked back at me and said, "Oh, hey, preacher, I'm just digging through this here can, see if I can find anything put on the table for supper." I said, "Oh, Miss Heidi, I had no idea you could not afford your bill." And she said, "Oh, I can, preacher. I can, but this month I gave my food money away to a family who was struggling to put new clothes on their little darlings for the school year." Well, I must have looked a little befuddled by that, because she decided it needed an explanation. And she said, "You see, preacher, I can still remember what it was like having to go to school with nothing but rags on." I know I said that I couldn't rightly remember when it was that I started to have feelings for Miss Heidi, but I reckon it was at that very moment. Well, that's the first tall tale from the church out in the middle of nowhere, and if you liked it, I would be more than happy to come back some other time and share with you chapter 2 about Chester Carbuncle, who used to bring his beloved heifer into the house during the winter so she wouldn't catch a cold. Now, if you ever get the notion, just want you to know, you're always welcome out there at the church in the middle of nowhere. I just have to warn you, if you stop coming to church out there, you might end up in one of my tall tales. But don't you worry none at all, because I'll be more than happy to change your real name and alter those circumstances so that your friends don't know who you really are. Now may the good Lord bless and keep you. May His grace shine all over you. And may His riches follow you all the days of your life and forevermore. Amen. Amen. We'll see you on Sunday.